Hi, I'm Seamless, and today is Friday, which means it's time for a new how to bass tutorial. And today, I'm going to show you how to make this sound. This was pretty fun. This was an experiment through crossfading Waveshapers, which I've done before. It started out as an experiment that actually didn't work, but I decided to do something that I'd done before, do this kind of thing. And also, you can kind of see that there's this patcher inside this patcher, and you could do that if you didn't know that. And what this is multiband reverb. I really didn't have a reason to do that. I just kind of wanted to see what would happen, and it was all right. It's pretty neat. It's a good way to make a more unique reverb, even out of regular, normal reverbs. It's kind of good stuff. Yeah, so this starts its life as a citrus. I could just feel a lot of you having this reaction right now, thinking to yourself, that's not citrus. Just look at it, look closely. It's totally citrus. Don't worry about it. So, sine wave, operator 1, operator 2 is almost a saw wave. It's, if you look at the waveform morphing thing, you can get like right up there to being almost a saw wave, and sort of the difference harmonically is that there isn't all the highest frequencies, and there are a couple like bands that kind of show up, comb filter-esque kind of thing. And while this doesn't really make it isn't really relevant for the sound, because if having something, what this is doing is it's almost perfect oscillator sync, but there's like a slight little edge to it that makes it just a little bit more interesting. Without all the distortion, this is what that sounds like. Now this is ratio 8, which is to say that it's 2 octaves higher than the fundamental tone. So we get kind of at least squarey harmonics. A little bit. I think some minor saws are in there too, but like it's mostly square, which you get when you FM stuff by an octave higher than the fundamental. As cool as the sound is, I actually didn't do any of this as a bass citrus. I actually started with just a sine wave, because what's happening here, like the real crux of what's going on, is these Waveshapers, which as you see are different. And I have the post and the pre both automated and being controlled by the envelope controller. So the post is the one that matters the most, because it's crossfading. So here's the first one, second one, and third one. So it's crossfading with the X control between all 3 of these Waveshapers. So this allows us essentially to change the distortion profile on the fly with automation. There's really got to be a better way to do this, but like the reason why the reason I tried to do this experiment, the initial thing I wanted to do was that I wanted to have a whole bunch of Waveshapers and control it with the envelope controller and essentially the volume on it. And what I mean by that is that I wanted the level of the input to determine which Waveshaper got chosen. Now, there's actually still some cool there's things you could do with the Waveshaper that do change the distortion profile if you just change the pregain, which is also why I'm automating the pregain. The pregain automation is a little bit more kind of strange. And this I earballed, which is to say that I just kind of listened for the change and then kind of did what mattered most. As far as like where the lines are, like because this third Waveshaper, for example, shows up only here, then like this is kind of where the pregame modulation has to be for it to modulate when it's on. Like what's going on over here doesn't really matter. But the higher level your wave shaping your pregain is, this is these I think all 3 of them actually are in asymmetrical mode, which would say that this quadrant represents the positive polarity and this quadrant represents the lower polarity. So when the pregain increases, the level gets pushed this way and this way. So the highest level means it gets pushed through this moment here. But if it's actually too low, it won't get pushed through that, which means that this won't actually happen to the waveform. So that's why the pregain matters for that kind of thing. But I was talking to Scott from ImageLine actually about this at Dance Fair about tube sag. And apparently it's the way that you can emulate this in distortion is by having a distortion curve that changes based on input level. Now, I'm not actually sure if this is input level vis-a-vis just like total like transient level, or input level as in like audio rate ring modulation, audio rate amplitude modulation of the thing. So I tried to mimic that by using the peak controller, setting the decay to its fastest moment so that it would read individual oscillations, which it did for really low notes, but not really for usable notes. So That experiment didn't really work out, so I decided to just do waveshaping and crossfading, which I believe I've only really done once in a hat bass, and that worked out pretty nicely. In fact, if I don't have any FM modulation at all, I'm just using just like a sine wave. This is what it sounds like. Although this is a bit misleading because in the top one here, not only am I modulating the FM on the X control that's inside Citrus, but I'm also modulating the volume. So it is actually getting quieter based on position of the X mod. So for it to be more like that, it would have to be something like this. I really like what the sharp automation is doing this sound. So yeah. Now, as far as what sound, I also kind of earballed this, which is to say that I wanted to kind of go from less complicated to more complicated, and I just sort of changed it around until it fit the profile right. And also, as far as where the crossfades are, like initially they were all straight lines, but like it's not a perfectly linear motion, which is to say that like even if like this guy's coming up as this guy's coming down, it still sounds like there's a little bit of like a wave moment where it gets too quiet because they both are lower than they are. Because level is a strange kind of non-linear moment, and not all controls control it in a way that presents as linear. So which means we have to have a bit of a logarithmic approach to kind of make things work out correctly. And which again, I also just sort of earballed to make it. I'm making that a word now. Earball. We're earballing things. I guess also technically eyeballing things because I was moving these things around like this until it sounded right. A huge amount of engineering is just doing shit until it sounds right. And then hopefully later we can explain why. Yeah, so these are all going into all three of these. I keep thinking there's a better way to do this in terms of signal, because right now we're essentially crossfading between three different things. And that should work. But there's just some like particular methods of the single path, and how distortion works or whatever makes you want to try different things. And I guess this is fine for what this is. The sound obviously works out okay, so it's not really a big deal. A tiny bit of EQ, and then go into the compression. But here's the reverb. So the reverb I split. I have low, mid, and high, and I really just kind of did random reverbs for these things, mostly short reverb though. And then I put all three of these into the same EQ. And the reason for that is because I wanted to put them into a fruity balance. And this fruity balance is being controlled by the last articulator in here. So articulator 7 actually is just straight up linear movement of X. And that's controlling Citrus's mod X, which is doing the internal modulation inside Citrus, which has its own nonlinear functions. So it's moving the X mod, forward and backwards or whatever. But like this guy's nonlinear and this thing is linear. So like that's how like I'm able to still have tighter control over Citrus, even though I'm using linear control of the envelope controller. The 8 guy, this is that reverb. So like instead of it being just on the whole time, honestly isn't that bad. I still have it. I have it coming down from the volume there, but I did still want some of the real reverb to come through, so I have the highs coming through independently. This is why I have 3 different EQs, because if I had the EQ, which originally what it was all 3 of these went into one EQ went into the balance, and then I put this guy outside it, and then there were phasing problems because the EQ introduces latency. I suppose what I could have done is I could have put all 3 of these into the balance going into the EQ, and then have one go into the EQ outside of the balance, and then we'll have one EQ. But I didn't think of that fast enough. I did this before I realized that is a kind of problem. Anyway, that's just this patcher here, and then this goes into Maximus, which is not doing a huge amount in terms of compression. I originally had this here because, oh wait, no, yeah, that's right. So I have this here to kind of force that there, but actually what's important is I have linear phase filters engaged. And the reason I have linear phase filters engaged is because of that particular sharpness that shows up when these moments hit. The linear phase filters preserve that sharpness by default just a little bit better than the default kind of filters. So in here, I'm trying to push the sub up. But I mean, anyone who uses a sound like this is gonna, separate the sub anyway, so it's not really that big a deal. Then the mids, I'm crushing pretty hard, but then I'm bringing down the post so that like they're bringing together, and then I'm bringing it down so that it's like EQ'd at a level that makes sense. And that I have a big old attack on the mids and the highs, and that's also preserving the initial transient of that sharpness coming on those moments with the automation. And same deal, this is getting pushed up kind of hard, but then I bring down the post so that like it makes it louder, but then it crushes it and brings it down, and it sort of evens out the whole thing is really what I wanted to do. And then the top end is just kind of just staying pretty even. And there's a little bit of compression, but there's also a bunch of soft saturation, and that's rounding out the sound. I'm also monoing the lows, spreading the mids and spreading the highs, but spreading the mids more than spreading the highs, which is something else that I earballed. And that's the sound. You control all of this by controlling that one thing. Boop. I'm actually just going to link, wham, that knob there, so that when I put this down in the description of this video that you can download this patch preset, you can just control it with this knob. Wee. That motion you're seeing there is one of these guys that I believe I have. Yeah, so I have centering engaged on this dude, and it's moving the pre-gain around, so that's changing where the center is, and it has to recenter it, and that's why it's making sound when you move it around. It's the glories of asymmetrical distortion for you. Yeah, that's pretty much all that matters about this. This is a preview of the new UI for Citrus, which is scalable, which I think is really, really cool. I especially enjoy what it does to this panel, so that I can see lots of harmonics, and I can see a big waveform view, and I can just keep making it bigger. It's really cool. More on that when there's more on that. Yeah. Anyway, if you have any questions about that, please let me, well, this whole thing, not really necessarily that, because honestly I can't talk about it, but if you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.